we have a short workshop with a lot of ground to cover, so I'll try not to go too fast. I have taken the title as a definition of what we're going to do. So this is a workshop, so you are going to do some work, okay? I'll do some talking, but you're going to do something as well. I have got headphones, so if you want to ask questions in Portuguese, feel free to do so. But I'll just get going, I think. Originally, this workshop was to follow my plenary. So some of the background to what I'm about to say, we haven't got time to cover, and this will make more sense when you hear the plenary, okay? But that doesn't really matter. So let's just get straight on with it. The title, as you can see, is... This works. Does this work? Aha, good, okay. Is building a world-class curriculum. Now that's what we try to do in my organisation, the Curriculum Foundation, when we work with ministries in different countries around the world. So that's our raison d'etre. That's what we try to do wherever we go. That's what we believe in. So what do we mean by a world-class curriculum? Well, that's an attempt to represent a world-class curriculum. Through the course of the work that we do, you know, we continually try to refine, clarify the definition of what a world-class curriculum should look like. So we suggest that it has 4 domains, as you can see, and those 3 sit within the sort of overall and all-encompassing domain of values, aims and principles. Every curriculum has got to be built upon a set of values, aims and principles. Otherwise it won't be consistent, and it won't be coherent, and it'll be very hard for teachers to teach, it'll be very hard for students to follow. And within those 4 domains, we suggest there are 10 principles. So I'll explain a little bit more about what they are, what they might be. So here we go. So the 10 principles within the 4 domains I've just described are represented here in different colours, as you can see. I've already mentioned that first one about being founded on values, aims and principles. And of course, another key principle is that next one. The curriculum's got to be exciting. Otherwise, why should we expect children to listen to it? You know, how many of us have sat in a classroom as a child and been bored to tears? Yes? Probably all of us. We shouldn't be doing that to them, should we? To our children, if we really want to learn. But of course, we should be. I'm stating the obvious, and I apologise for that. But we've got to focus on every aspect of a child's development, haven't we? So that list there: intellectual, physical, emotional, social, scientific, aesthetic, creative. We've got to develop all those aspects of every child. When I speak to people about the curriculum, sometimes people say, well, surely it's just a case of taking the science and the maths and it's all the subjects they need to know and that's it. And it's not, is it? It really isn't. It really is much more than that. The curriculum does need to be much more than that. So that's the first domain. That's the two principles within the first domain. Let's look at the next 3 now. Gilmar has already talked about competencies. We need children that are capable, don't we? We don't just need them to be knowledgeable, we need them knowledgeable, we need them to be capable. They have to have competencies. We'll return to that later. And something else that's missing very often from the curriculum is those next 2 things. A sense of hope. Children have got to believe that this is actually going somewhere, haven't they? That there's a purpose to this, and it's going to fulfil some sort of need within them and lead them to a future. And that sense of agency as well. Too often children in classrooms get the sense that education is done to them. Yeah? And they need to get a sense that education is actually equipping them with abilities and knowledge that mean that they can make a difference. A sense of agency. They can go out in the world and make a difference. If children don't believe that, it's a problem. The fourth one, we need them to have independence of mind and action. We need them to be able to act for themselves. And we also need to develop their individual interests and talents. You know, if you talk to people who have become famous for something or other, they very often tell you a story about how their talent was discovered totally by accident. There's no system within schools for finding out what children are good at, or there's very, very minimal systems for finding out what children are good at and developing that. So that's another really key point. And the last one on that page, it should be focusing on their imagination and their curiosity. If we don't do that, they won't want to find out, will they? That's, you know, lifelong learners. We need lifelong learners. And creativity. These are all things that employers complain about children lacking, school leaders lacking. So that's the first 5. And then we have 5 more principles that relate to the other 2 domains. All right? And this one is perhaps where people often start. Of course, the curriculum has got to include all the branches of learning and the subjects. Statement of the obvious. Something that's often missing is the next point. It's got to highlight interconnections between that learning, all those branches of learning, all those subjects. And it's also got to make sure children understand the relevance of all that learning to their life, to global issues, to world events. Again, you know, perhaps stating the obvious, but really key points. It's got to provide pathways. Third one on here, it's got to provide pathways, and something else that Guillemard was talking about earlier on, flexibility. The world changes fast, doesn't it? And we can't have a curriculum that is put in place and we expect it to be there and stay there for the next 10 years. 10 years is no time now, is it? You look at the phone in your pocket, you probably would have marvelled at 10 years. Well, we all would have marvelled at 10 years ago, wouldn't we? So flexibility is also really important. And then the last 2, relating to the 4th domain, also so important and often forgotten. People sometimes say as well, in conversations about the curriculum, well, why don't you take that really good curriculum from that country and just implement that? You know it's good. You can't. It wouldn't make any sense. You know, why would any child be interested in a curriculum that's got nothing to do with their own life? So the 9th one, it should be relevant to learners' life, local communities, national, international, and last of all, but also really key, it should address contemporary issues. We often, again, we write a curriculum. 2 years later, 3 years later, whatever, things happen in the world, don't they? Sometimes I go into schools and there's been some major world event, and I say, well, have you been talking about that? You know, have you covered that in your lessons? Oh no, it's not in the curriculum. You know, all these opportunities to make learning really relevant because the news is full of some story about, I don't know, a natural disaster or the World Cup or whatever it might be, and it gets ignored. So contemporary issues and those big ideas that have shaped the world. When I left school, I didn't know anything about capitalism and communism. I'd never been covered. Big ideas like that, you know, big ideas about religion, history of religion, I really had not been taught. It wasn't in the curriculum. So I suggest to you that those are 10 good world-class curriculum principles, but we come to that question at the top, you know, how do we design and develop a curriculum that actually meets all those criteria? Okay? So, well, what do we do? Those 10 world-class curriculum principles, by the way, are on our website, so if you want to find them anytime, Curriculum Foundation website, they are there. People use them in 2 ways, and these are the 2 ways. Sorry. One as an audit, because it's, whether it's a national curriculum in a country or an individual curriculum in a school, you can take those principles and work through and just ask yourself all those questions. Is our curriculum doing this? So an audit is one way that it's used, and the second way is as a sort of a start from scratch approach. You know, you sit down with a blank sheet of paper and say, right, we're going to develop a new curriculum. We know it's time, we've had this one in place for 10 years, it's way out of date, let's start from scratch. So either way, you can evaluate what's going on against them, use it as an audit tool, or you can start from scratch and say, right, well, let's build on these principles and see what we end up with. Either way, what we want, of course, is this, isn't it? We want a world-class curriculum. Right, so what happens next? Well, this is something for you to do. This is an exercise which, done properly, you might well take half a day over, or a day, or longer, and you might do across the whole country, or at least across all the different stakeholders in a school, depending on what level you were working at. But it's a really valuable exercise. Today, because it's a workshop and we don't have a lot of time, we'll spend just 5 minutes on it. Okay? But what you do is this, answer these questions. What do young people need to succeed in the 21st century? Okay? What do we want our young people to be like when they've studied our curriculum? Or the other way, how would you describe a young person who's really equipped for life now? In front of you, you have a sheet of A4. So, preferably with the person sitting next to you, in a group of 2 or 3. As I say, no more than 5 minutes, because we'll have to move on. But simply, draw yourself a stick person. It's not an art lesson, so don't spend any time on that, all right? Draw yourself a person, and just put some descriptions around them of what you think they ought to be like as a result of studying the curriculum in your school or your region or your country. Okay? Is that task clear? You're just going to write words on the page to describe how you think this person should be as a result of studying your curriculum. Okay, I'm sorry about this, but I have to say, stop. Yeah. Now, I did say to you that really you need a long time for that exercise, and I'm sure you understand, having just started to scratch the surface, that you really do need a long time. But I hope it's given you just a flavour of the value of that exercise, because the audit tool that I just mentioned, the 10 principles in the form of an audit tool, have been downloaded from our website thousands of times, and people always feed back that it leads to some great discussions, and it leads to people doing this exercise, and that leads to some great discussions, because you really get to talk about the fundamentals of education. What are we really doing? What are we really there for? Okay? Should we just take a little bit of feedback from around the room? If you wouldn't mind just shouting out one word from your group that you came up with. And if it's in Portuguese, then someone else can tell us what it is in English. And if it's in English, someone else can tell us what it is in Portuguese. Just so, let's just do a few. So this table here.
We came up with some bigger concepts.
Okay, just tell us one big concept.
Respect and tolerance.
Respect and tolerance, fantastic. So do we need that translated into Portuguese? Okay, that was easy. All right, let's go to over there. Emotional intelligence, brilliant. And in Portuguese, that is? Oh, well, that's easy too, yeah. Good. It's a Portuguese lesson for me as well, this. Right, the next table?
Critical thinker.
Critical thinking, great, yeah. And in Portuguese? Oh, that's a bit more difficult, okay. Anyway, good. Thank you for that one. Is that 2 groups on that table? You all together? Do you want to offer one?
Motivation, good examples.
Yeah, motivation, motivated. We want them to be motivated. And in Portuguese? Okay. Next table?
Focus and possibility of choice. Foco e possibilidade de escolha.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. And also on that table? Do you have one to offer?
Aprender a conviver.
Which is in English?
Learners learning life.
Lifelong learners, yeah. Brilliant, yeah. Okay, great. Let's go back from there.
Autonomy.
Autonomous, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we can't have students being dependent, can we? Excellent, okay. Next one?
Cultural knowledge.
Cultural knowledge, yeah. Excellent, yeah. Great stuff. Back behind there?
Learning how to compromise.
Yeah, ability to compromise. How important is that?
Translation for compromise.
Someone translate compromise? Okay.
Compromise is quite
Come to a common agreement from a different points of view, okay? Does that help? Okay, next group.
We want to develop curiosity.
Curiosity, excellent. Yeah, next one. Sorry, in Portuguese that is? Okay, curiosidade. Is that right? Okay, next group. Sorry, I didn't get that. Sorry, I'm not hearing. Critical thinking and?
Ability to solve problems.
Problem solving, excellent. Yeah, okay, great. Thank you. Next one. Happiness, yeah. How important is that, eh? How often does a curriculum focus on happiness? Next one. Coming down the table, next table.
Ability to draw informed conclusions.
Excellent, yeah. Right, yeah. Reasoning, arriving at conclusions, yes. And in Portuguese? Okay, excellent. Right. Next table.
Know how to distinguish between information and knowledge, because there's a lot of information out there.
Very good, yeah. So it's taking critical thinking a step further, isn't it? In Portuguese, how do you say that?
Diferenciar informação e conhecimento, né?
Excellent. All right, good. Did we miss out a group? Did we miss out a group behind? No, we didn't. Okay, this group here.
To be open-minded.
Open-minded, yeah, excellent. And in Portuguese? Very good. Okay, well done. Next one.
Awareness of linguistic and cultural diversity.
Awareness of linguistic and cultural diversity. And in Portuguese?
Consciência da diversidade linguística e cultural.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Down here.
Ability to think in another person's position.
I think, yeah. Understand another person's position.
In the community, to think about the other person's problems,
Yeah.
position,
We might say empathy. Empathy in English. And in Portuguese, that is?
altruism.
Altruism. Yeah, very good. Okay, down to the last table. Are you working together? All right, okay. So is it you?
No, we did it.
All right, okay, you've got it. All right, so great. That's really helpful. That's really useful. There's lots of interesting words came out there. I'm going to ask you to do another little exercise now. Now, from what you've got on your paper and what you've just heard other people say, since you didn't have time to work through it in any detail, and again, let's take 3 minutes. That's all we've got. All right. What does this tell you about? From what you've written on your paper and what you've heard other people say, what does the exercise tell us about what our learners need in terms of knowledge, about their values, and about what they actually need to be able to do? All right, so we're sort of categorising what we've said. What does it tell us about the knowledge they need? What does it tell us about the values that they need to develop? And what does it tell us about what we need them to be able to do? All right? 3 minutes. That's all you can have. I'm going to stop you again now. Sorry. Again, you could do with much longer, couldn't you, for that conversation? But all we're doing is getting a flavour. So sorry to bring you back again. Right. So we're just going to take that conversation a little bit further. Firstly, by asking this. So if there was whatever there was in your diagrams of the conclusions you came to about knowledge, well, for a start, was there anything? Did you write anything on your sheets about knowledge? Anyone raise a hand if they did? Okay, a little bit. All right. So we come to that question. Was it subject knowledge or was it other knowledge that you wrote down? Was it subject knowledge? A little bit, okay, some of it was, yeah. How much of it was other knowledge other than subject knowledge? Hand up, okay, a few, yeah. So, 2 conclusions. There wasn't much about knowledge at all. There was a little bit about subject knowledge, and there was a little bit about other types of knowledge, yeah. Put your hand up if you wrote on there that children must know all about quadratic equations. What about oxbow lakes? No? No. I mean, people never put that kind of thing. There's a bit of knowledge. It sort of touches on knowledge, but we're thinking about the whole education of a child, aren't we? And knowledge is important, but it's much bigger than that. There's a key part of the conclusion, I think, from this. Yeah? which we won't dwell on, I'm sorry, because we haven't got much time. Let's ask the next question. How many of you wrote something that's to do with children's values, would you say, on there? Quite a bit, wasn't there? Yeah? There always is quite a bit of values, quite a lot of reference to values. So the question, could we produce a list of values that we want our learners to have from this exercise? Quite easily, couldn't you, actually? Yeah. And that's a key thing that people come up with when going through the exercise. You know, whether it's sort of a national level, we want everyone in our nation to have the following values, or at school level, but it's a really useful thing to have, isn't it, actually? And me as a science teacher say, to know that, I've got to teach science, but actually I'm responsible for contributing to children developing these national values, or these school values, whatever they might be. But, you know, really we want every teacher in Brazil, don't we, to be working towards a set of values for children, a set of common values. The exercise of going through and agreeing what those values might be obviously would take a bit of time, wouldn't it? And you'd think about who you would want to involve in it and so on. But actually it wouldn't be, you know, we could probably do this, if we had time, we could probably come up with a pretty good list of values right now. You know, we want them to be honest, don't we? We want them to respect and to have respect and tolerance. We want them to recognise that corruption is a bad thing, you know. We want them to be good members of society. So, anyway, we could come up with a list of values quite easily. All right. Next question. Sorry, hurrying on again. That one. So could we produce a list of competencies? And we won't get into the debate right now about the differences between competencies and skills, because we could talk about that for many, many hours, so we won't. But could we use this exercise to produce a set of skills and competencies that we want learners to have? How many of you would you say that you've put some competencies or skills on that list, on your diagram? Yeah? Usually that's quite, you know, there are things we want children to be able to do, aren't there? So, could we produce a list of competencies and skills through this exercise? Well, yes, we probably could. All right? And we won't go into this now, because we must hurry on. But the UNESCO competencies, perhaps you're familiar with? You're familiar with those? Some of you are. Critical thinking, communication, cooperation, and what have I forgotten? Can't remember. It'll come back to me in a minute. But anyway, you know, we could easily work out a set of competencies that we want everyone to work towards, and clever thing UNESCO did was to make it 4 C's, wasn't it? So to make it memorable. Creativity, well done, whoever said that. Thank you. Right, so moving on from there, the next step is that one. What does this exercise tell us about the overall aims of the curriculum? So, clearly what we've just done, well, we could say we want our curriculum to, you know, develop these values, develop these competencies and so on. So let's have a look at the kind of thing we're talking about. Now, clearly these are only suggestions. This is a list put together from a range of curriculum aims, actually from a number of different countries, but, you know, it looks different. Clearly the exercise leads to a different set of aims wherever it's done, but with an awful lot in common. Yeah? So the aims might be something like this. We're talking at national level, but something like that. Patriotic, responsible citizens who want to play a full part in society. That's not a bad aim, is it? All right? Confident, self-reliant people who are ready to take their place in the labour market. You know, I could give you lots of examples of places where children are not prepared for a place in the labour market, they're prepared for something else, you know. In Morocco, for example, when we were working there, massive strikes because, massive demonstrations because young people were being taught at school, going on to university, getting degrees, and there were no jobs for them. And so they were demonstrating to say, well, we need jobs in government. Government should be giving us, you know, it can't work that way, can it? Anyway, I mustn't get into each one of these in any detail. Lifelong learners, somebody mentioned. Adaptable, ready to adapt to new situations. Be agents of change. You know, don't accept the unacceptable, be part of the process, of the democratic process, of bringing about change. Creative, innovative individuals who are curious, adaptive, productive. Quite a lot of the words in there are actually the words that came up just now, aren't they? Yeah? And how much better would it be if you were writing a curriculum, if you set off writing the curriculum as subject specialist or whoever, with this common set of aims that everyone's working towards? I'll come back to this later on when I'm in the plenary. Okay, so aims. And then what about, if you have aims, they lead to design principles, curriculum design principles. So curriculum design principles might look something like this. So as people sit down in their subject teams to write out the curriculum, to develop the curriculum, a set of guiding principles is a good thing, isn't it? And here are just, again, a set of examples drawn from different places, but something like a culture of excellence that supports innovation, creativity, effectiveness, continuous improvement. That's not bad, is it? If everyone was striving for that. Environment of empowerment. You know, children shouldn't be passive recipients of the curriculum, they should be feeling empowered by it, shouldn't they? That promotes independence, individual learning, critical thinking, problem solving, emotional intelligence. In fact, what a team we have in this room, eh? You came out with all of those, didn't you? Yeah? Next one, the context of heritage and culture, that thing about you can't just transplant the curriculum from somewhere else and expect it to work. You know, young people need to have their heritage and culture reflected in the learning, don't they? In the classroom. It should be there every day. It should be strengthened. They shouldn't feel that someone else, that, you know, the culture and heritage of the USA is the most important thing. Actually, no, it's Brazilians the most important thing, isn't it? Builds national pride identity with an understanding of global citizenship. What's it mean to be a global citizen? But you know, to be so as a Brazilian. And then, again, we've touched on some of these, a spirit of hope, respect, peace, reconciliation, unity, national pride, democracy, global understanding. These end up slightly different in different countries, depending on the context, of course. You know, we work in some African countries that are not long out of, well, still involved in war, and then you get a much greater emphasis on the peace and tolerance and so on. But, so they shift, depending where you're working, but they should be actually tailored to the country, shouldn't they? Absolutely. I hope you agree with that. Okay, so, can we take 3 minutes? Let's have a go at, let's see whether we can pull out any, you may not have time to do more than one of each, but from what you've just done, what you've written on your sheet, the conversation we've had, can you think of an aim that you would want to see as a curriculum aim for Brazil? Or for your school, it doesn't matter which, or for your region? Can you think of any principles that the curriculum designers should be guided by? All right? So once again, we'll take 3 minutes. Ridiculously short amount of time. This is just to start thinking, practice that exercise. So I've given you some examples. Over to you. I do feel very bad about this. I'm so sorry. Okay, sorry to stop you. Now, ideally, of course, we could go around and collect the aims and principles that you've come up with. I'm afraid we don't really have time for that. But I'm sure that you've got some very good principles, maybe having something in common with those design principles, and maybe having something in common with those aims. But I'm sure you can see the importance of having these things in place that we're all working towards and that end up producing a really consistent, coherent curriculum that hopefully will meet these world-class curriculum principles. Okay, so I'm going to hurry on now, if you don't mind. But I hope that exercise has at least got your mind working in the right way for producing this. So I'm going to go through some other aspects of the curriculum now quite quickly. Clearly subjects are really something key, aren't they? And no one would ever say they're not, and no one would ever say subject knowledge was not important. And by the way, sometimes people who are resistant to change will say, oh, well, you want to introduce competencies. Oh, so you don't care about subject knowledge anymore then? And of course that's not true, but that's an argument which is used all over the world by people who are resistant to a modern curriculum, to change. So you must always come back and say, no, subject knowledge is even more important than it's ever been, and they'll learn it better than they ever did with this curriculum. Okay, I'm just giving you the argument that you have to give if you come across these people. Anyway, so let's get down to subject and cross-cutting issues, which is here. Just to quickly tell you the difference, subjects, of course, we all know about. Cross-cutting issues, going back to what we were doing before, there's always some learning that is important, but doesn't necessarily fit within a subject, and that's, we usually term it cross-cutting issues, and that's the sort of, that's the learning that has to be taught by teachers across different subjects. And sometimes people might say, I don't know, aspects of ICT, for example. Sometimes ICT is a cross-cutting issue that is taught within a number of different subjects. Yeah? Anyway, let's not dwell on that. Clearly what we've got to do to fulfill these two principles at the top of the page there, this one here about intellectual, all the different branches of learning, or all the different disciplines and the branches of learning, is to decide what is taught where and when. And this is, of course, a really big question, isn't it? What do you teach at pre-primary? Do you teach any subjects at all? Or is it all developmental? Is it actually taught, or is it learning through play? Yeah? Do you actually, I mean, some countries say, well, we will have two subjects. We'll have literacy and numeracy at pre-primary. But that's a big, big debate, isn't it? Which, of course, we haven't got here time to have here. And then when we get into subjects at lower primary, upper primary, secondary, which subjects do we teach? And which are, as it says, which are compulsory subjects at those stages, which are options, which are electives, how much time do they get? So, you know, this is clearly something I'm dealing with very, very quickly indeed, but clearly big questions that need a lot of debate. And we'll get that, you know, they're always hotly debated, of course. And, of course, it's also true, isn't it, that it's important who you have doing this, thinking about this. You know, if you gave the whole curriculum to chemists, they'd write a chemistry curriculum, wouldn't they? Yeah? Well, it used to be in the hands of the church, as we were hearing earlier on. You give the curriculum to the church, well, of course, it'll all be about religious education. So getting that balance right, so that you have the right people contributing to the debate and getting the curriculum where we might want it to be is absolutely important, absolutely key. So I've already mentioned about cross-cutting issues. It's learning, it's sort of subject learning, but it's not subjects. So it has its own curriculum, it has its own syllabus, but it actually fits in across a lot of different subjects. So that's subjects. And an exercise we could do, but we haven't got time, would be to start penciling in what we think goes in where. So what subjects are taught at different areas, what cross-cutting issues should be taught at different ages. And let's move on. Now, this is a big question. It's a big question wherever you go, and I think it's a big question for Brazil as well. What should the policy be? Sorry, I've... not got you there. So you could do that exercise, but we don't have time. Yeah. This one here, language of learning and languages. Really important, isn't it, that we get this right? Language of learning, now a lot of countries, and Brazil's no exception, is it? You know, you haven't got 100% of the population speak Portuguese at home. So what do you do about that? And in many countries there's a policy which is that for the first few years, learners learn in their home language, whatever that might be. A difficult thing to do, but it needs to be thrashed out, because literacy, what we need for young, research shows, and we won't get into the detail, but research shows that literacy development happens best in your own home language, and after maybe 3 years or 4 years or whatever the decision is, a point should be reached at which those literacy skills are transferable onto whatever the language of learning is next. Now clearly it's Portuguese across much of the country, and in the early years that applies as well, but it might not apply in the early years for all, across the whole country. So that's a decision that needs thinking about. If there is to be a change of learning, a change of language of learning, when should it happen? Said usually 3 or 4 years, but it's got to be thought through. And then this one about which foreign languages and at what ages. And, you know, is English starting early enough is a question we've already talked about today. Yeah? And all I can do in the time, I'm afraid, is to highlight that as a big question. But absolutely crucial, isn't it? But we do debate those things and get it right. So let's move on. Culture and heritage. I'm not trying to say to you that culture and heritage in Brazil is all about samba. It's just an excuse to put a photograph of my daughter, who is a samba dancer, amongst other things. But seriously, you know, the question about culture and heritage is another complex one. You know, there's no such thing as Brazilian culture and heritage, is there? There are aspects of culture and heritage which might apply across the whole of Brazil, but we have to think about that, you know, at a national level, at a regional level, at a local level. I'm sure culture and heritage in you know, up in the north in the Amazon would be entirely different to, you know, a lot more on this, but really crucial, isn't it? You know, you might just, to a child in the Amazon, a Rio curriculum is probably just as foreign as one from, I don't know, from Germany or Canada or whatever. So really does need a strong focus. And then, having thought about that, which elements fit naturally into subject syllabuses at a national level? So what could you put into a national curriculum? And what would you have to leave to be included, you know, maybe in a local, regional curriculum? Or what would you have to leave to school level? So all I can do in the time, I'm afraid, is raise the question. We can't debate it now. I wish we could. So let's move on. Again, if we had time, we could work through this as an activity. So what should be the policy regarding language of learning? And what foreign languages should be taught and when? And what are the elements of culture? And, you know, if you had a week in a workshop at national level or in your school, wherever it might be, you could say we'll spend a day on that now. And if we tried to do it, we'd have to do it in a minute. All right? So we haven't got time to go through the exercise, but I hope you can see the importance and the value of doing so to make a curriculum that really is customised to the children in front of you. Okay? So, question then. We've had a whistle-stop tour through a process of developing a world-class curriculum. So, have we, if we did all this and did devote the time to it that we need, would we be meeting these 10 world-class principles, which I won't read through again, all right, but you've seen them before, you will see them again. We have 4 minutes if there are any questions. I'm sure that's totally inadequate, but would anyone like to raise any issues that this has brought up for you? And I'll put this on, half on in case there's any in Portuguese. Yep. Right. Do we have a microphone? I'm sure. Anyone with a question? Anyone would like to raise an issue? You don't have to, of course. Okay, we've got a couple at the front here. Here and here.
It was not very clear to me about the principles. Could you talk a little bit more about it?
Yeah. Yeah. So, having worked through that process and said, these are the aims of our curriculum, okay, the curriculum design process comes next, of course. If you work, I'm talking about that sort of blue sky approach that I spoke about at the beginning, starting with a blank sheet of paper, okay? So you work through the process, you say, right, these are our curriculum aims that are going to deliver, hopefully, the kind of child that we've just worked on and described. Now, having done that, the curriculum needs to be written. And you need to get your scientists and your mathematicians and your Portuguese and, you know, all the different subject teams working. And you could say to them, well, here are the aims we're trying to achieve, but it kind of makes more sense to say, well, let's turn this into some design principles, like a sort of curriculum specification. So you say to them, well, when you're writing the curriculum, these are the design principles you've got to work to. Okay? I don't know if it helps if we go back to those principles that are on here. Oops. There we are. Those kinds of things can be very helpful. Yeah? Does that make sense? Next question? Yep.
As you know, Brazil is going through this process right now, and I thought it was very, honestly, cool the way they just opened it up for everybody to be able to give their opinion online and to have a voice. But then there were like 200 million comments and suggestions. And so my question to you is this: having seen other countries go through this, what advice would you give for Brazil at this moment moving forward?
There you've put me on the spot. One thing that's very impressive about the Brazilian approach is this fact of having a comprehensive consultation period, and then there's a second consultation period to come. So that's really good, isn't it? I mean, in an ideal world, I would say you wouldn't start from here. You would go through this process of what are our national curriculum aims, what are our national curriculum design principles. That's the best place to start. But I would also say that in a way it doesn't matter, because if the standards come out and the standards are good, then actually this process we've been talking about could be covered at regional level, local level, even school level, couldn't it? And the standards are the standards. We've got to meet those. But as Gemma was saying earlier, standards are not a curriculum. They're just the standards we've got to reach. So it can still happen before the curriculum is implemented, and it can still work well. Okay, I'm sorry that was only 2 questions, and I've now run out of time. So I must simply say, when I get there, there we are. Thank you for listening.